was toward the end of my college career that I took this plane flight. And I remember it was on the flight from Florida back to Minneapolis. My mother and stepfather at the time lived in the Tampa area. And I was flying back from some break, but it had to have been late in my college career because of the impact that this had. And I mentioned on previous episodes that while I studied German as my primary major, I was very heavily involved in theater. And for a while, I considered going that direction, maybe going and getting a Master of Fine Arts in acting, or trying to make it as an actor. And I get on this plane and I sit next to a gentleman, and we kind of start chatting. And as the conversation goes, it turns out that he is a professional actor in New York and a member of Actors Equity Association, which is the acting union for working stage actors. In my mind, I've told the story for years that he was the president of it, but I doubt that he was. I think that's a detail that I've added over the years. But anyway, we're getting in this conversation, and I'm telling him, where I am in my life, and then I'm thinking of going into acting, and he tells me his story that he moved to New York in his early 20s to try to become an actor, and 2 or 3 years of scrapping around, waiting tables, audition after audition after audition, and nothing. And one day he just packed up and took a job teaching English in China, got on a plane, flew to China, was there for, I think, 3 or 4 years. And then kind of equally suddenly, one day was in China and woke up and thought, that's it. I'm going back to New York and I'm going to give this another shot. So flew to New York, and as he told the story, he said from the minute he landed in New York the second time, he just went straight to success. Like, just got an audition, got that part led to something else, led to another gig, got an agent, got into Actors Equity. And he said within 2 years of getting back from China, he was a full-fledged member of Actors Equity. And he said to me, there was absolutely nothing different about the first time and the second time. The only thing different the second time was I got lucky. And he said, just be prepared if you go into acting as a profession that your success largely depends on that. It's just luck. I've seen 10,000 people more talented than me on my way to where I am right now. And the only difference between me and them was I got lucky. And that just a profound impact on me. And it lends itself to this episode in 2 ways. Number one, our main topic this week is 3 generations of financial services. That was the point at which I decided, no, I'm not going to go into acting. I need to find something else to do. But it was probably about 1.5 years after that I met you, Philip, and my financial services career started and has remained. And the other side of it is that it also ties into our article review that we have, which is the importance of not tying too much to words and the importance of what words mean as labels. So that starts off episode 26 of the Valuability Podcast, 3 Generations of Financial Services, Part 1. This is going to be a Part 2, as is becoming normal for the episodes where we have guests. We had a great conversation, and so we're going to split it up over the next 2 episodes. The Valuability Podcast is for financial professionals, business owners, and anyone interested in financial planning, business, leadership, and personal development. We believe that financial success comes from building a plan on the foundation of your values, and building your ability will help you get there. My name is Danforth Fleek. I was a financial advisor product wholesaler and actor wannabe for over 20 years in the financial services industry. I'm joined by Philip Simonson each week. Philip is my co-host, friend, and mentor. Philip has been in financial services for over 40 years as a financial advisor, field leader, sales trainer, and has been a senior manager covering areas such as advisor development and field operations. So, Philip, the big question here is, how many times now have you broken the backhoe?
Oh, painful.
For those of you that haven't been following, Philip has rented a backhoe to build some trails on his property in northern Minnesota, and there have been a couple of mishaps where the backhoe has gotten injured. We're not looking at you, Garrett Simonson.
No, he's got a couple of them, and then, of course, the old man being competitive. How big of a rock did you get out, Garrett? Did you see my rocks? And, yeah, you think, I would have left it just at that? Oh, no. This is a 12,000-pound, it's not a mini excavator, it's the real deal. And, of course, I notice I'm taking some big rocks out and pin breaks. Oh, the buckets now hanging on one side. And my cousin told me, well, who I rented it from, you got to take out insurance, and you just never know with these machines. And so I had that insurance. That's a little bit of a peace of mind. I said, wow, all right, I'm taking it out of the woods, bringing it back to the road we built, cut into the land of 40 acres. And there's one last rock right at the entrance. I said, well, let's see if I can, you know, that one side of the bucket is hanging. I said, well, maybe the thumb. And sure enough, I get it underneath there, and I get it up, and I got the thumb on it. And I'm looking, and I said, it's a huge rock. And I was pretty proud of myself. And I just watched the whole thing. The thumb just, this is thick steel, just bend right on over. I go, stupid is optional. And if you're going to be stupid, you better be strong.
Oh, man.
Well, yesterday was running around, and let's just say I got it down to, it's a $2,400 fix. So,
Ouch.
but if I got $1,000 deductible, and so I'll be out $1,400.
So where are you on the 5 levels of mastery with the excavator?
I am now becoming more conscious incompetent. Now I know what I don't know, but I am not. And some of it too, to be honest, it's heavy machinery. It's got 20,000 hours. The guys I'm up here in the Iron Range, and I mean, oh, I mean, some of the tires on some of these trucks up here, they're 20 feet high.
Oh,
So
yeah.
I'm going to, get this manufactured isn't that difficult. So we go in, you find one, and they just said, look, been doing this. I'm part of the 49ers, been part of the 49. I was part of the 49ers for 10 years. You just happened to be the guy using it when it broke. It's taken a lot of stress for a long time, and
Right.
it wasn't all you. I'll tell you that. These machines can take a lot. Here's what I did, and then we'll go on. But one of the greatest inventions the human being has come up with, and since I built this house and used one before, to do the foundation, is hydraulics. Hydraulics are amazing. Just
Yep.
amazing. I mean, with a joystick, and you're controlling so much.
I was watching a YouTube video the other day, actually, that was theorizing that hydraulics was one of the possible ways that they built the pyramids. It's really fascinating.
wow.
Actually, I'll put a link to that in the description of our podcast for folks that might be interested in that. But it's fascinating. I'm not 100. I mean, it's a theory, right? So it may or may not be true, but just the concept of it was really, really fascinating. Normally they say they build a big ramp and they go through the whole process of why that's likely not the case. length of the ramp and so on and so forth, and what it would take to actually get stones up that high. But super fascinating on that note, that type of knowledge has been around for
Mm.
thousands of years. Well, you can find the Valuability podcasts on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, TuneIn, wherever you find your podcasts. You should be able to find us. We also have a YouTube channel. Search Value Ability on YouTube to find us there. And lastly, you can always find us on our website, value-ability.com. Click on the episodes tab, and all of our past episodes are on the player there. Wherever you find us, please like, review, subscribe, and share. And as always, sharing is the number one thing you can do for us. So if you like our content, please pass it on to someone that you think might enjoy it also. If you'd like to connect with us, our email is info@value-ability.com. Again, that's info@value-ability.com. And if you'd like to connect with us on social media, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, we've got it all. Go to value-ability.com and click on the Contact Us tab. All of our social media links can be found there. So that leads us to our conversation for this week. So let's jump right into our conversation with Brett Fulmer, otherwise known as Broker Brett. We are joined by Brett Fulmer, Broker Brett, podcaster and videocaster extraordinaire. And he was one of the first people that reached out to me on Twitter as I started building our Twitter account, and just threw out a message to me, hey, we should collaborate on something. And even though he's our third guest, he was actually the first person that reached out to us. So we are happy to bring him on today for our exploration of 3 generations in financial services. So the idea popped into my mind that Philip started in the business in 1981, and correct me if I'm wrong, Philip, but that was the middle of a recession, correct?
Correct. It was actually 82.
Oh, okay.
And I don't know if you want me to tell you. I've never
Not the
told you.
full
So,
story quite yet. I know.
okay.
I know you will go there if I let you. So just let me finish this quick. I started in 96, the middle of the biggest bull run in the history of humankind. And then Brett started in the industry in 2009, 2010, that time frame, and now has added to his business in the middle of a pandemic. So he has started in a totally different time frame. And also, of course, we, being different ages, are different generations technically, although I'm a Gen Xer that skews millennial. I'm on the cusp, and I identify better with the millennials anyway. But that being said, we are technically 3 different generations. So I just thought it would be really interesting to get us all together and do a little bit of a roundtable on how we each got started in the business, what were some of the challenges and successes that we faced, and then most importantly, what does that mean for someone starting out in the business today, and what can they learn from those things. So Philip, back to you. Why don't you start with 81?
81, I started going through the training program, orientation. I think, no, it was 82. I was still
Okay.
playing around, actually. You're right. Let me see. I'm going to be 63 years around the sun this October. It was, I traveled in between it was my junior fall of my junior year. I went over to Europe and did the vagabond thing for about 10 weeks. Came back, finished college. But that summer, I met, we'll just say Bill. Bill was the best man in my wedding. Just visited him yesterday. Bill does, just say a couple commas, like maybe 3 commas in this business now. Uh, he and I started a painting business back in college. Well, I was making more money coming out of that college than any entry level position. So I said, well, okay, did the Europe. And I know my personality. I said, you know what? I'm going to go to Africa. And so I went to West Africa. I had a brother who was living there at the time. He was setting up, helping people, and he's a minister. But it wasn't the evangelical. They were just helping them with the agriculture and being more productive and in the English language and teaching English. And so I saw him. Spent a couple of weeks with him in Senegal, then at the Islamic Republic of Mauritania, now just Mauritania. Then went to Kenya, did the safaris, came back, and an old friend of ours, and since seventh grade, his dad was the pastor in our church, and Nate. Nate's only been fired by two companies, the Atlanta Falcons and the Minnesota Vikings. Uh, he's pretty much scripted. He likes to say win-win, but it's pretty much win-lose. Every play is a defensive tackle. But he met me at the airport, and he said, "Here." Gave me the book Vanita Van Caspel, inflation, the Robin Hood of the '70s. Here's what we're going to do. You're going to go to IDS, and we're going to do this financial planning gig. I met with Dallin Reed. Well, I said, well, first of all, stop. Why wouldn't I just join you at Waddell and Reed? Well, I didn't do my due diligence as quite as well as I wish I had. IDS has a 2-week training program, plus they pay you $500 a month. And okay, and why are we doing this financial planning? He says, well, I'm a little, he's an econ all-American. He's a bright, bright young man. He said, look, there's 72, 78 million of us. We're pigs in a python. We busted the grade schools. We busted junior highs. We busted high schools, colleges. We're going to be busting the first, apartments, the first home buyers. This economic recovery tax act out your way, Brett, trust with verification. Old Ronnie, he said, Ronnie said, got the IRAs going. Nate, it was real quick with the time value money. He said, we're going to follow the money and we'll do all right. And hence, lo and behold, that's how I started. And I can tell you, I can keep going more, but I'd like to hear other people's stories, and I'll tell you more about my challenges and that environment. But just note that environment, we'll come back to it, but interest rates prime rate was 21%, inflation was at 13%, money markets were 17%, mortgages were at 15%. Oh, chicken little, the sky is falling. It was, you can't make money in this. The market was 900, hadn't even broke 1,000 yet. And you know what? Here's in essence, what I learned is don't waste a crisis. Presidents pray for them. That's your opportunity. And for the opposite of crisis, the symbol of in China is opportunity. So I'll come back to that and tell you what took me a while. I got my forehead bloodied a bit, but finally did figure it out.
Awesome. Brett, you want to start with your story? We'll skip back and forth a little bit and fast forward and then come back to me.
No, it sounds good. I appreciate you guys having me on, and just as a kind of a lesson out there, just ask. You see people doing good work. Like I really enjoyed your tax episode. That was the first one I listened to. Thought it was super
awesome.
thorough. And as somebody who generally just kind of riffs, I thought it was cool the way you guys were planned out, had a message, or almost giving like a course, in a podcast. So I really enjoyed hearing that, and thank you for the good work. And by the way, Philip, I'm a little jealous of traveling pre-internet. I feel like I cheated. I would have buddies living somewhere you could look everything up, but to actually plan and have a travel agent and go explore, I think that sounds awesome.
Yeah, it's too true. You're right.
Yeah. So for myself, born in '85, I'm 35 right now. Not the most intense student, was thinking psychology, did comparative religions, was actually looking at nursing as a career, but saw my dad in the pool by 3 o'clock or playing golf every day and knew he had a pretty decent income. I was like, oh, I'll go try that. I forgot about the years of, paper routes and refereeing, to help make ends meet. But yeah, hopped into copier sales, 2009, Great Recession. Banging doors in Irvine, collecting 30 cards a day, cold calling 4 hours a day.
Wow.
My dad had been the top salesman forever and was potentially going to buy a moving company he had worked for 25 plus years. So I went to work with him for about 6 years, and I was curious about insurance. You know, a friend who's the same age as me, but always a little more mature, had looked at it as a good industry, and so I got my PNC license to tell where the office moving projects were going to be, and then overall the industry just looked better. So it was obvious he wasn't buying the company. I made the jump to a personal lines agency where I could sell into commercial. You know, that owner was a little bit funky after about a year, hopped around a couple sales jobs and decided just to try my own hand at a brokerage about 2 years ago. Got connected with a cool startup. Then one of the last sales jobs, I had to get my life health license.
Right.
And the startup I recently connected with was out of Canada. They're working on coming to the US, and they're around the life insurance side of the business, term, disability, critical illness, whole life, on occasion. But started helping them out, started getting more involved in, buy sell agreements, key man agreements, started making sure my friends had at least, $500,000 in place. So, definitely the novice of the group, placed my first life insurance maybe a year ago, and, still get help with more involved cases to make
Good
sure we're
on you.
taking care of people properly. But yeah, happy to be at the table and excited to learn more, and a lot of room to grow in this side of the business for sure.
We're never done. We're never done learning. The day if you're not growing, you're dying. That's kind of my mantra.
Yeah, so I'll jump in, tell my story. So I started in 1996. I got college in 95. Born 1973, and I originally studied languages, communications, and theater. So languages, German was my major, but I also spent a lot of time in theater. And I looked at that route and realized that in that profession, the majority of being successful was luck. And you could be really, really good and never get lucky, or you could be just okay and get lucky, and that success really wasn't predicated on your talent. And I thought that I should probably go try and do something where my talent could shine through, but I didn't know what that was. Honestly, I had no idea what I was going to do. So I ended up getting a job with a nonprofit, an orchestra here in the Twin Cities, right out of college, just pounding credit card numbers into an accounting software. I was good with numbers. I always knew that. And I was always interested in stocks. My godfather, when I came up to Minnesota, so I ended up moving up here to go to high school. I went away to high school. We moved a bunch when I was a kid, and I wanted to go to one high school. We were going to move 2 times during high school. And I said, you know what? I want to go away to school so I can go to one high school all the way through. And when we came up here, we stopped through Iowa, where my mother was from, and I met my godfather for the first time. I hadn't met him, so I think I was 12 at this point. And he saw me looking at, back in the day, they had the stock section in the newspaper, and I was always fascinated with it. I didn't know what it meant, but I was always fascinated with it. And so I was looking at it, and he's like, oh, are you interested in stocks? And yeah. I didn't even know what they were at that point. And he said, all right, well, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to give you $500 a year in a minor account, and you pick a stock and I'll invest it for you in that stock. And so I picked a couple stocks. I was big into computers, ended up picking Apple, and that did pretty well in the late 80s and early 90s. Right. So I would say I was a mini Warren Buffett. I only bought what I knew, but that was all I knew anyway. So, but then it went dormant. I had that interest, but it didn't really go anywhere. In high school and college, I really focused more on languages and theater. And then one day at the orchestra, I was meeting with the person who was in charge of major gifts. So courting the big donors. And I said, I don't want to do this anymore. I've been doing it for a year, and it was, literally like, 1,000 credit card numbers a day gets really old pretty quick. And so she said, oh, well, my friend's husband graduated from the same school that you went to, and he likes to hire people from that school, so give him a call. Ended up being Nate, Philip's friend. And so 20 years later, had built a successful business, and I actually got into the business on the ops side. I was an operations manager, did paperwork, got my supervisor's license, and did compliance and operations. So that's really where I started, and we'll talk more about how I slowly crept over on into the sales side. But I think that's really interesting. As everyone was starting out with their story, it just occurred to me that, you know, I had never heard that portion of your story, Philip, but I know then that you went into a very structured IDS training program. I came into an independent firm, but the only training program I really had, Philip, was you. It wasn't the big corporate wide training program, but I did have structure. I did have that. And now we've got Brett, who is now in this day and age, it's much more the learning style for how you find it is self learning, right? Like kind of putting it together and doing it yourself. Not that there weren't people that did that before, but one of the things that I've noticed over the years is really the decline of that. Hey, I'm going to go work for Merrill Lynch and they're going to teach me everything I need to know. Or I'm going to go work for New York Life and they're going to teach me everything I need to know. A lot more it is, hey, I'm out here on my own, kind of figuring it out as I go. Or as Philip likes to say, building the plane as you're flying it.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds like the startup way.
Right?
But yeah, we've noticed, there's a huge decline in the career shops. For Fineo, we're hoping we can pack enough kind of intelligence into it where it can do that blocking and tackling for new producers and see if they can cut their teeth. But, once you get to a certain level, you definitely need that human element to build the relationship, push the paperwork through. Nobody wants to buy insurance. Nobody wants to work on financial planning, until they're north of six figures. But, there's so many people that need help early on.
So true. So true. Yeah, I'd agree with it. What other major challenges do you see, or that you faced, Brett, that as you reflect back, and what were your key learnings?
Currently it's that, finding a niche, insurance, get rich in your niche, you kind of get rich slow.
Mm-hmm.
I have the problem of plenty right now. As I've moved back to my own agency, it's been insuring startups, some personal lines, and then, life insurance for my friends. So I'm trying to double down on, the avenues that have worked. I kind of mentioned it in the intro, but I do feel a responsibility to make sure my friends at least have, the basics covered, in terms of life insurance. And as I get more knowledgeable, I'd love to work on the planning side more, as we kind of have a bigger client base, because I think that's when the real close relationships start to form. I always compare finances to your own medical records. When you let somebody peek into your bank accounts and income statement, it has that kind of vulnerability. So I think you need that, that friendship and that openness there. I think that's a huge part, it seems like.
It's so huge, and our business is, it doesn't matter, widgets, uh, selling stocks, bonds, whatever, financial planning, or shoes. Come, it's the key responsibilities of the salesperson doesn't do not change, and it's about relationships. And as that's ultimately, and I loved what you're helping your friends. We're glorified social workers by heart, but we're capitalists by brain if we do this job properly. And and I was just sharing this with Nate this morning. I said, look, most advisors when they're out there, financial planners or brokers, look, they're going to sit down with a client or a prospect. They know that prospect's there to sell them something. They know they've got something to sell. They have to sell, or they're not going to be in the business. So what oftentimes I see is the shoemaker's son or daughter goes without the shoes. So what I learned right away is that, hey, you just excuse the phrase, but you're just looking at my petticoat. Yeah, here's and I'm looking up your petticoat. I got, you have to have that open, frank, confidential conversation with them, just like you mentioned, Brett. I call it a financial health checkup. And I, you know what? I wouldn't ask you to invest in or do anything that I wouldn't do. And I would just share with my clients, here's what I have. If you want to know, this is my portfolio. This is, this is what I pay in taxes. I have no problem with that. So I like, I think that's that openness. And as you say, if you're open and you're self-aware and um, you're going to make a better connection quicker. That doesn't change, 40 years ago to today. And what you said too, niche wise, that resonated with me. And my niche, it was prime rate, 21%. There's an opportunity with every crisis. And when you're coming in, you just have to find it. Well, I lived in Minnesota, 50% federal tax bracket, 17% tax bracket in the state of Minnesota. I was only 25, but the area I lived in demographically, they were mostly in their, probably 62 was the average age. So they had, there was money there, but now they were also just thinking about it. Their need now is more income, right? And security, because they've given up their number one asset, their ability to work. So you've mentioned too the mailers. I would buy these mailers, and they're perforated business, perforated business reply cards. So they'd rip them off and they'd send them back to us for $73.50 a month, and then and IDS would co-op it, so they'd pay the other $73.50. So it was what, $147 or something like that. I'd send out 1,000 mailers. I would get probably a 2 to 3% response rate. But on that mailer was John Nuveen Municipal Bonds Unit Investment Trust, and it would have on there 10%, 11%. I was selling munis AAA rated at 10 to 12% at different times. Well, the 50% tax bracket, you got to get a 20% rate of return or 22 in the market to beat that out. And then you got the state tax. You had them queuing up. So I did not, in the 2.5 years I beat my head the first 3 or 4 months. I just, it wasn't working. And I just figured, perseverance is the key I think you need to have if you're going to make it in this industry, and self accountability. But I ended up within 2.5 years, 232 customers. And I learned then, what's the difference between a customer and a client? A client thinks so highly of you, they're willing to add you in as a line item in their budget. Customer buys something one day, one product, and maybe gives you a referral, but you got your commission up front, you're gone. So I had to go back to these clients, and someone taught me, and that's another key thing I learned is, again, in this industry, you have to have good mentors. Someone who's achieving what it is you want, and ask them for their help. But you got to be willing to do the work. And I had a gentleman who taught me this financial planning, and I got my CFP, one of the first, in 85, and I just went after it. And that, and Nate as well. Uh, Now, if you do the financial planning, you do the 6 areas of financial planning, you have 200 clients. 200 clients. I am Norwegian. I do have a flat forehead because we go around going oofta, 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 hitting our palm of our hand on our forehead, right? Finally figured out, 200 clients times 6 areas of financial planning, 6 times 200. There's 1,200 windows of opportunity when I'm going back doing the reviews. And again, loved what you said, Brett. You're helping your friends plan for that certainty of uncertainty. And what I mean by that, you can be certain everyone's going to die, and I think all death is premature. But boy, why don't you make sure you're covered? Because at least at the beginning, until you build up a big enough nest egg that you can, it's stress tested, and your family's taken care of even if you die, because of the income your assets earning that enough money coming. You don't need insurance.
That's really interesting to connect those, because I would say that my biggest struggle I didn't overcome. So in 2001, I ended up moving out to actually California, to the Bay Area, and my girlfriend had moved out there. So I chased her out there and got a full-time sales position. Now my timing is always impeccable. I started on Monday, September 10th of 2001 was my first day of full commission sales. And I have to say, I just never really even figured out that I needed to find a niche. And I didn't do terribly, but after a couple of years, I ended up moving back to Minnesota for family reasons. But had I stayed, I probably would have ended up finding a different sales job, which is essentially what I did. I then went into the wholesale side of the business. I was an internal wholesaler, and then went outside in 2007. And with wholesaling, that is really the absolute definition of a niche, right?
Right.
Here's your list, go get them. And that I did great with. Like, here's your 1,000 agents that you can call on, 1,000 brokers you can call on. Go find, 150 that want to work with you. So I would say, yeah, that's one of the first main points that I think has popped out here is finding that niche where, whether it's a hard niche that you say, I'm not going to work with anybody but this, or it's just, hey, this is the area where I'm going to concentrate. But having that concentration is a key to building that business. It just, when everybody's your client, I just sat and struggled. Even within the bank, I was in a bank. We had, thousands and thousands of depositors and customers at the bank. So yeah, I just never really ended up focusing in on one particular group. That's really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and kind of to pivot back to Phillips, I just love insurance because you're taking care of people and you can have a great outcome. There's very few things when you can do genuine good and do really well monetarily. Sorry, Philip. Yeah, I just think you hit the nail on the head with that.
No, I was going to say, I earlier, I don't think this is on the tape, but I just found you just had a paper route. I had a paper route. I think that a lot of those little things that you're growing up lead you to where you want to, the independence of being in our world and what we're talking about, an independent contractor. So if you're a self-starter and you know how to get along with people, and ultimately people say, well, what's the number one thing you need to do, around the marketing? Well, what I've found is, uh, maybe our audience has heard this before, but I think it's worth repeating. The best marketing approach you can have or strategy is market your morals, and, do what you say you're going to do, tell the truth. And and if you get stronger at this, and you do with time, because initially when you start, you think, hell, you'd sell a dead dog a policy if you think you can, make it happen. But you learn to weed and save. You learn to weed and save, and then when you're working with your clients, you eventually figure out, you know what, I'm now at a position where I'm not going to take you on as a client unless I like you. You might not have to like me, but I got to like you. Then, because two, you also have to act on my advice. If you're not willing to act on my advice, because I'm going to point some things out to you that, I might be blind spots or your emotional biases. And if you keep doing what you're doing, it's going to stop you from achieving your goals. Eventually, what I got down to too, because you can't push a rope, you can pull a rope, but I'm going to, look, you're going to pay for you're going to be paying for my advice. So that's why I moved to the financial planning. And it's a lost leader, but what I found, if people don't pay for something, they don't value it. So by having them, come in and pay, and at the end of that, initial meeting, it comes down to the implementation. One of the things I've noticed, you're serious about achieving your goals and objectives, Mr. and Mrs. Client, but you do not have a written plan. And I believe you need one. Would you agree? And most say yes. Well, okay. Well, for me to do this, it's going to take 7 to 12 hours, and for to do that, I'm going to have to charge you a fee for $1,000 to $1,500 for my time to put this together. But I'll make you these two promises. These two promises with this thing. First one is, if you don't like it after I present it to you, you can rip up the check, and we won't go anywhere. The other promise is, if you do like it, then you know what? We will sit down, because this goal setting process was easy. Everyone would be achieving it, and there'd be none of these self-help books on the New York bestseller list every month. It's just not going to happen, because the human race can't live with delayed gratification. They got to have everything now. So, but what we'll do is, I will assure you that we're going to sit down and we're going to at least have an annual review, and we're going to answer these three questions. Where was I? Where am I now? And what do I have to be doing differently to make sure I stay on track of achieving these goals? Because don't grade me on performance. You grade me on performance, I lose right now, because I can't beat year in, year out the Dow Jones or the S&P 500. What you will grade me on is that when we do hit a crisis, and by the way, we will, I'm going to protect you on your downside. And most importantly is that I keep you on track to achieving your goals. Now I'm off my tirade, or I'm off my soap opera, etc. But you got me going, Brett.
I'm taking notes. Keep it going, man. It's good stuff.
So it reminded me of, we talked a little bit before we started the recording, and in just getting to know Brett today, we chatted a little bit about his thoughts on where he would go in his future if he would add the security side of the business and go into the full planning. I remember answering a question on Quora from someone about that exact question. I am an insurance only, broker right now. Do I need to add the security side of the business? And my answer, and I'd be interested to hear your thoughts as well, Brett, was no, you don't have to, and you don't even really need to. In fact, this world on the life insurance side is losing. I mean, there are plenty of securities guys that won't ever talk life insurance. And so having life insurance only people helps. I mean, you can help a lot more people if you're focusing on that one area. But like you have done, you need to partner with somebody. But do you foresee the possibility of just staying insurance only?
I look at it like manageable verticals, and I always think of the leader kind of being at the bottom of the pyramid. Right now, we're selling some personal lines. It's going to be really easy to recruit somebody to keep that, taken care of, home, auto, basics. Later, traditional commercial insurance, again, we could find a professional, we can get them trained. I think they can do that. I wouldn't mind leveling up my own financial planning and security in a couple years once those other balls are rolling, because working one-on-one with a business owner, doing financial planning, it might be a little more sophisticated, and we may be able to chase those people down, but I have interest in it as well. So
Sure.
I see doing that, as I accumulate more wealth, as my friends accumulate more wealth, I could see, instead of the blocking and tackling of term products, getting more proactive, in how we deploy capital. I hope to mature into it. I'm 35 right now, maybe when I'm around 40, I'll be ready to kind of go in those deep waters.
Mm-hmm.
No, that's interesting. I love that analogy of the leader being at the bottom of the pyramid. We talk about that concept, but it's not exactly with that analogy. That's terrific. I really like that. That wraps up our main portion of the podcast for this week. Make sure to tune in next week for the last section of our discussion with Brett Fulmer. You can find Brett on LinkedIn. Just search for Brett Fulmer. That's F as in Frank, ULMER on LinkedIn. And on Twitter, he is at broker_Brett on Twitter, so you can find him either of those two places. If you are a financial services startup, he as he mentioned, works with those on a regular basis, or if you're in the area of property casualty insurance or life insurance as well, you can reach out to him in either of those methods. So we will transition into our article review for the week, and with this article, I went a little bit off the board in that it's not specifically a financial services or financial planning related article, but the title of it is "This is the Damage of Labels." And in the article, it goes through three stories. First of all, it goes through a story the author was applying for a resident assistant job during college that he really wanted to get because it would reduce the tuition that his dad would have to pay the next year. And he didn't end up getting it. He was really stressed by it. And when he didn't get it, his dad actually was relieved. And he said it was the first time where he realized, essentially the core of this article, which is looking at something as either good or bad exclusively in a kind of unitary state, A, isn't healthy, but B, just isn't very realistic. Obviously, there are good and bad things to that experience. The second story that he uses to illustrate this is a story of a woman who had a daughter with a developmental challenge and how she started to look at that differently when I think in the article she references that she was planning on having a super baby and then was, emotionally very challenged when this super baby didn't arrive the way that she pictured it. And it took her a while to look at that hurdle as its own unitary thing and see the positives in it, and not even just the positives in it, but that one experience isn't lesser than another, especially when it comes to physical or mental challenges in humans, doesn't diminish the beauty of that existence. It's just different than the typical quote unquote normal existence. And then the last bit is a story I'm sure many people have heard, but I will just read this portion of it. It's the old story of a farmer, and it's a parable where the farmer loses a horse and his neighbor tells him, "Oh, that's bad." And the farmer says, "Good or bad? Hard to say." Days later, the horse comes back with 7 wild horses, and the neighbor says, "Oh, that's good." Farmer shrugs and says, "Good or bad, it's hard to say." The next day, the farmer's son rides one of the wild horses, is thrown off and breaks his leg. The neighbor says, "Oh, that's terrible." The farmer says, "Good or bad, it's hard to say." And then the next day, officers from the army come knocking, looking for men to draft into the army. And the neighbor says, "That's great luck." And of course, the farmer responds, "Good or bad, it's hard to say." Thought that parable was right up your alley, Philip. So I'll toss it to you and let you start out with your thoughts on the article.
I like them all personally, and the first one, change makes us grow. I makes me think about. I'm somewhat in agreement with that, but I have a little different perspective on that, and it's everyone thinks about changing the world, but no one really thinks about changing himself. And the ironic thing is, change is inevitable, and but and everyone has to deal with it in their lives. And on the other hand, though, here's where I differ. Growth is optional. And a lot of people fight change versus just accepting it. And if you're willing to accept it and learn from it, that's where the real growth comes. I look at these as, when these situations occur in one's life, there's a, I call them the crucible moments, the big ones, and it's how you handle that and uh, can be life alternating. And sometimes you might not know it at that present time, how it's alternated your life, of course, but in retrospect and how, and your willingness to accept the change, that's where the greatest growth is going to come if you uh, listen to it. So, it goes to the next one. I think it's Dan. I usually screw this up, but it's names. I'm not very good at pronunciation. Anything over one syllable that usually gives
To be
me
fair, you
trouble.
get the initials right. That's the crazy thing about it, is you always get the first letter of both names right. It's you can't remember the actual name. So if it's James Kelly, you come up with John Cartwright. Like it's just infallible.
It is. So I'm talking about, of
Sure.
course, it's Viktor
Yeah.
Frankl here, right? And he says, if there is a meaning in life at all, then there must be meaning in suffering. And now, as I've lived, going on, as I say, almost every podcast, 63 years around the sun, if you live long enough and you have been blessed to have time, be one of your, because I think time is one of the greatest assets, and greatest, and really, it's really time at this stage of my life is my best currency. But you're going to suffer as you go through life. There's going to be suffering, and it doesn't matter, suffering. Um, how should I say this? It has no boundaries. It's the great equalizer. You can be rich, poor, black, white, red, whatever nationality. Once you go through suffering, you can come through it two ways. You can come through it with compassion. Compassion leads to humility, and then the other way is you come through it with resentment, and resentment, if you're not careful, anger, excuse me, and that anger turns into resentment, and that you close your heart off because you can never forgive then, and you're stuck in the past. So I think, boy, when suffering does come here on earth, I call it hell on earth, you got to be willing to accept it and sit back, listen, and reflect and grow from it. And don't put the labels on it. It's neither good nor bad, which comes to the next one. It's just, it's over course of time. It's going to play out. I think, and I loved it, with I think in here, ultimately she says too at the end, all of us have warts and imperfections. And that's where you and I've always said, Dan, and I've learned is that we're all perfectly imperfect. And I love that phrase. And I know this, the point, and she says too, the point of this human life, I believe, is love. And Lisa, remember my lovely partner and wife of 37 years told me, here's what love means: letting others voluntarily evolve. I'll repeat that. Love, that acronym for love, if you turn it into an acronym, letting others voluntarily evolve. Life is a journey. It's not some prepackaged vacation, that you're going to tour that, or holiday. You got to roll with it.
Yeah, I'll jump in and say, like many things, I think about this from both sides. Early in my life, I was a glass half empty person, very obsessive compulsive about things, worrisome, worrying about all the possible things that could go wrong. And over my life, I have evolved into a more positive thinker. But I do see the way that some people criticize that type of thinking as just, kind of, positive thinking mumbo jumbo. You can critique that, but the way that I look at it, the thing that really jumped out to me from this article was it's not even so much seeing things as good or bad, because at different times in your life, you will see them there are moments where things will strike you and you will take a pessimistic view or you'll take an optimistic view. The key is being an actor versus being someone that is being acted upon. to me, that's really the crucial key, is that are you interacting with that and comprehending it, or are you sitting there and just saying, oh, these things are happening to me? So again, even going to kind of the power of words, yes, they are powerful, and yes, you should, when appropriate, try to frame things in a positive manner. But I don't even think that it stops at that level. It's the fact that you are thinking about the power of those words and comprehending the impact that it has on you, and being self-aware, and in your acronym, voluntarily evolving denotes that you are acting in that process. And so yes, I
Right.
personally have found a great deal of impact in using positive language and positive memories, especially with some of the things I've learned in controlling my temper, the power of using positive memories to control my temper. Those things are very real. But I do also am acutely aware of those who look at that skeptically and say, oh, no, that's just, you can't fix every problem in the world just with positive thinking. And that's absolutely right. The key for me is that agency. Is it, are you interacting with it as an active interactor, or are you just being passive and being acted upon? So that was really the big piece that I took away from that. And just one last bit, because I thought to me, it really summed up the entire core of this article, is the woman who had the daughter said that she was working with an occupational therapist, and they described her daughter Fiona's eyes as neurologically dull. And she said that she looked at it as calm and attentive. And I just thought that was so beautiful and poignant that I had to mention that, because I think that's a great example of being active and interacting with that, and thinking, no, this isn't just some passive thing I'm describing. This is a human being, and that characteristic you can describe in a negative way, but describing it in a positive way encapsulates what's beautiful about that person. So, any last thoughts before we move on?
Yeah. Sum it up. You can't control what's going to happen to you, but you do get to control how you're going to respond to happens to you.
Perfect. Well, if you have questions for us or topics that you would like us to cover in a future episode, you can reach out to us via email, info@value-ability.com. Again, that's info@value-ability.com. Let us know about an experience you have had where the way you see or feel about that experience has drastically changed with the passage of time. Upon further reflection or additional insights. It doesn't have to have been long in the past. Sometimes those things happen pretty much immediately. So it doesn't have to be years later you look back, but just something that's happened in your life that initially you looked at it one way, and then later on, with some additional thought, you started to look at it from a different standpoint. If you'd like to connect with us on social media, we have Twitter, Instagram, Facebook accounts, and we do post things out there on a consistent basis. Go to value-ability.com and click on the Contact Us tab. All of that information is there. Wherever you find us, please like, review, subscribe, and share. Next episode is 3 Generations of Financial Services Part 2. We will have the second part of our conversation with Brett Fulmer, Broker Brett. I'm still going to say, consistent listeners, I know you're out there. Send us some questions. Come on. And That will take us to the end. As always, thank you for listening. Be sure to join us next week. And remember that financial success comes from building a plan on the foundation of your values, and building your ability will help you get there. This is a podcast collaboration, not a peer-reviewed journal or a sponsored publication. We make no representations as to accuracy, completeness, correctness, suitability, or validity of any information in this podcast, and will not be liable for any errors, omissions, or delays in this information, or any losses, injuries, or damages arising from its display or use. All information is provided on an as-is basis. It is the listener's responsibility to verify their own facts. You should be aware of the real risk of loss in following any strategy or investment discussed on this podcast. Strategies or investments discussed may fluctuate in price or value. Investors may get back less than invested. Investments or strategies mentioned on this podcast may not be suitable for you. This material does not take into account your particular investment objectives, financial situation, or needs, and is not intended as recommendations appropriate for you. You must make an independent decision regarding investments or strategies mentioned on this podcast. Before acting on information on this podcast, you should consider whether it is suitable for your particular circumstances and strongly consider seeking advice from your own financial or investment advisor. The views and opinions expressed on this podcast are those of the authors and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of any other agency, organization, employer, or company. Assumptions are not reflective of the position of any entity other than the authors, and since we are critically thinking human beings, these views are always subject to change, revision, and rethinking at any time. Please do not hold us to them in perpetuity.